Let's welcome into the show Washington Post NBA writer, Mr. Ben Golliver. Ben, how we doing?
Oh, I'm doing great, Ryan. I'm down here in New Orleans. Just saw the Suns wrap up their series, headed up to Memphis to catch them here in a couple days. My favorite time of year. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, and I wanted to talk to you about that game in particular. First of all, simply because of the performance by Chris Paul. I think the biggest thing is that a lot of people didn't expect Booker to go. And he did. He got some limited time and contributed, but that game was so back and forth, and Chris Paul was just absolutely perfect.
Yeah, it was an amazing atmosphere at Smoothie King Center. The crowd was going absolutely nuts. The Pelicans are up 10 at halftime, and just slowly but surely you got the veteran old man game from Chris Paul to just pull that back in Phoenix's favor. He kind of set things even in the third quarter, and then in the final 2 minutes he completely took over, just orchestrating on a different level. It was painful loss for the people in New Orleans because obviously, Chris Paul used to play down there. He kind of eliminates his former team. But you just saw their the savvy that they worked up through their finals run last year. Chris Paul finding DeAndre Ayton, setting up Devin Booker for a clutch three, and then some big defensive plays by Mikal Bridges. I think it was really a nice statement win for the Suns, who had struggled a little bit in that series without Booker, to just let everybody know, hey, going into the second round, we're back on track. We're ready to do this thing.
How important is DeAndre Ayton? We saw the importance of what he was able to contribute a year ago, but it's a year later. Devin Booker, the injury limited him. Chris Paul, is getting up in age, even though he did what he did. How important is DeAndre Ayton in the next round?
Well, he's huge. He had a great playoffs last year. He came into last year's playoffs facing all these questions about,
right.
Hey, he's a young guy, young centers struggle. Is he going to be able to do it? And last year in the second round, he actually had a head-to-head matchup against the MVP, Nikola Jokic. He held his own, really held Jokic in check, and was really the key X factor in that series. It's going to be a totally different challenge this year in the second round going against Dallas. They try to spread you out. It's all small ball. It's all shooting. It's all guys who are going to try to make DeAndre Ayton cover a lot of ground. And so for the challenge for him this year, it's not about banging with the Joker, one of the biggest bodies in the NBA. It's all about really quick footwork and then trying to make Dallas' small ball, punish them on the other end and try to get some scoring around the basket. We can see, Phoenix might try to actually go away from Ayton at times in this series to try to play matchup basketball with the Mavericks and go a little bit smaller themselves. I think that's one thing to kind of keep an eye on. Does Monty Williams stick with Ayton, or does he try to mix it up in this series?
Yeah, speaking of that Dallas team, right? Luka Doncic wins his first playoff series. They do it on the road. All three teams last night on the road, clinching their series with victories. Talk to us about Dallas and that matchup in round two.
Well, it's such a funny scenario, right? Because Luka's basically year 4, and we're waiting for the breakthrough. It's his third time in the playoffs. Is he finally going to be able to get it done? If he wants to be mentioned as one of these all-time greats, guys like Jordan and LeBron were making the playoffs and winning series pretty earlier in their career, and Luka hadn't done it. And the amazing thing is, he wasn't the main driving force in that series. It was actually, the Robin to his Batman with Jalen Brunson just outplaying Donovan Mitchell in the first round and really establishing himself as, I think, one of the most coveted free agents this summer. Jalen Brunson is going to get paid because he torched the Utah Jazz in that first-round series. So the nice part for Luka is the pressure is off because he finally did have the playoff breakthrough. He's no longer the guy who's never won in the postseason when a guy like Trae Young and DeAndre Ayton, guys from his draft class had already had some playoff success. He's got that monkey off his back. And even better, he's got a supporting cast that really stepped up and showed that they could do something in the postseason, whether that's Jalen Brunson, Spencer Dinwiddie, and Dorian Finney-Smith played some great defense in that first round, too. So Luka's sitting pretty right now. He's thinking, well, I'm a little bit rested. I'm back healthy. I'm on the court, and I've got a lot more help than I had in last year's playoffs, for sure. The tricky part, though, is they're going against the best team in the league, with the Phoenix Suns. Mikal Bridges is an unbelievable defensive player. I think he's going to get a lot of time trying to slow down Luka, and that's going to be a really, really fun matchup to watch.
It is. I'm looking forward to that matchup. The third game of last night, of course, the 76ers traveled up to Toronto, and they absolutely put a beat down on the Raptors team. They looked like the team in the East that is capable of doing that with Joel Embiid and Maxey and everybody playing at the top of their game. How did they overcome? Because I think a lot of people were pulling on the cape of Doc Rivers thinking, is he going to do it again? Is he going to do it again? And this team came up and played their tails off to get them to the next round.
Well, you're exactly right. I mean, I think everybody was waiting for the Sixers to fold, right? Whether it's Doc Rivers or James Harden or Joel Embiid. I mean, a lot of questions, people kind of waiting for them to choke. I was actually joking and calling Toronto America's team because it felt like everybody was rooting for them to knock Philly off, even though they're the only Canadian team in the league, right? But, when you step back from all the narratives, who's going to choke and all this, Philly had the better star talent. Toronto kind of came into this series exhausted and banged up. They had played their main guys a lot of minutes during the regular season, and they were just a little bit tired. And you see Fred VanVleet, really limited impact as that series unfolded. By contrast, you've got the best player in this series in Joel Embiid, who really was able to kind of fight through the thumb injury that was bothering him these last couple of games and just emerge above everybody else as the predominant physical player in that series. And then also James Harden had an extra day of rest prior to that Game 6 and looked like he was, back to a throwback version of himself from a couple of years ago, setting up his teammates with great passes, scoring the basketball a little bit, and just really able to keep everybody involved. They need that version of Harden if they're going to beat the Miami Heat in the second round. I think the Heat are going to be favored in that series. The Heat are much deeper. They've got more playoff experience. A number of their players have been to the finals in past years, whether that's Jimmy Butler, Kyle Lowry. I mean, they've been some places that Joel Embiid hasn't been. But there are some favorable matchups for Philadelphia. Embiid is much bigger than Bam Adebayo inside. And then James Harden and Tyrese Maxey. I mean, someone's going to be able to get the pick on Tyler Hero, who's kind of a defensive weak link. So Philly's going to have a shot. I'm picking Miami, but I think it's going to be one of those series that's really hard-fought, intense. I expect some flagrant fouls, probably some trash talk in the media. It should be like good old-fashioned 1990s basketball.
The Memphis Grizzlies and Minnesota Timberwolves. We're speaking with Ben Golliver, Washington Post NBA writer. Game 6 tonight up in Minnesota. They can close it out. Ja Morant has been spectacular late in games. Minnesota has just crumbled. Kind of give us a scouting report expectations for that matchup.
Well, this is like the last team standing, right? It's like who can avoid blowing the game is the team that wins, right? I mean, there was even so many mistakes in that Game 5 where you mentioned it was Ja Morant's best game of the series. I think he had like 13 straight points to close that thing out for Memphis and just a spectacular game-winning layup and everything else. But there was still so many just minor mental errors on both sides or strategic errors that, maybe these coaches would want to get back. I think if you're Memphis, it's one of those series where if you win Game 5, you're probably going to win the series. That felt like a very pivotal victory. They now have 2 chances to kind of close out Minnesota. And the biggest problem for the Timberwolves, to me, has been D'Angelo Russell. He has not showed up for prime time. He's kind of a max-level player, a guy who's made an all-star team, was supposed to be, kind of the floor general out there. I don't think he's done a very good job of keeping Karl-Anthony Towns involved. I don't think he's really struck the right balance with Anthony Edwards. To me, those 2 guys, Towns and Edwards, have actually been the driving force for Minnesota, and they've kind of left Russell behind. If Minnesota wants to force a Game 7, they need a much better performance from D'Angelo Russell. I'm not sure they're going to get it.
Hey Ben, real quick, I'm not sure if you've seen the referee assignment tonight in Minnesota, but Scott Foster's doing the game, so get ready for Game 7 on Sunday.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, everybody thought he was going to help Brooklyn extend their series. Jason Tatum fouls out in the Game 4, and then sure enough, Brooklyn finds a way to blow it. So the refs can only help you so much. I mean, still the players are going to decide this thing, right? But look, there's been the officiating in that series, by the way, has been all over the map. I mean, just kind of very inconsistent. You saw the Grizzlies coach take a fine. He was actually calling the officials arrogant. I'm sure the NBA league office didn't love to hear that after one of Memphis's losses. But, this is what happens when you get young teams. You got guys like Ja and Anthony Edwards who are just trying to find their sea legs in the playoffs. And it makes for very exciting basketball, even if it's not always the crispest play.
Well, it's not just that series. You saw Joel Embiid kind of going back and forth with Nick Nurse, who was kind of complaining all series about the calls in their games.
Oh, absolutely. NBA's been handing out fines left and right. You got Jimmy Butler doing obscene gestures and everything else, right? So, I mean, this is the best time of the year for the NBA. I think that the spotlight is on. These players are trying to make reputations. And I think one of the big takeaways from this year's playoffs, no LeBron, Now Kevin Durant's out, right? This is a new wave of superstars who are all saying, wait a minute, we're not in the shadows anymore, right? Now is our opportunity to be the headline players. Let's go out there and dominate the headlines and be the guys that everyone talks about on SportsCenter and everything else. And, we're seeing a changing of the guard in this year's playoffs.
Ben, now that Dallas is taking care of Utah, what's next for the Jazz? What do you think this team needs to do, or what are they going to do in the offseason?
Well, I think they're probably going to blow it up. It just becomes a question of how much do you blow it up. The interesting thing that people haven't really talked about is they have a relatively new owner in Ryan Smith, and he's from that area. He has always been a Jazz fan, even when he was a kid, right? So it gets to be hard if you're the owner where you're saying, well, this is an organization I've loved for decades. Am I really willing to trade away a franchise player like a Rudy Gobert or a franchise guard like a Donovan Mitchell and take a big step back and go into a rebuilding program, right? Like, it's one thing if you're just kind of doing it from an analytical perspective and saying, well, this is the right thing for us to do right now. It's another if you're an owner and your heart's really into it and you have that connection. So, we'll see, is he really willing to take the plunge there? To me, it's just time. This formula has, hit a wall. It's not working. If you watch Rudy Gobert in these games, I mean, he is just so demonstrative and negative towards his teammates. Sometimes he's stomping his feet when they make defensive, mistakes or they blow coverages. And that stuff just wears on guys. I think it's time for a culture shift. If I were them, I would very seriously consider trading Gobert, even though he's been there quite a while. And even though, to me, he's their best player. And I would also explore the market for Mitchell and see if someone was willing to overpay in a trade to grab a guy who has, that marketability, that name recognition that a lot of teams seek. Mitchell had a very tough playoffs. I don't think he's as bad as he looked against Dallas. But at the same time, the vibes were just off, and it's time to really, hit the button and blow that thing up.
What does that mean for Quin Snyder then, too? I mean, his name's been batted about, his contract. What does that mean for the head coach?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. It's very strange when a coach is under contract and he has those kinds of conversations come out, more than a month before the end of their season. So I would say that's to be determined. But if you're saying, is he going to be coveted around the league if he were to move on? Absolutely. I think he's got himself in that conversation as among the NBA's most intelligent and well-respected coaches. Obviously, he had a long coaching path to kind of get that first job, a bunch of twists and turns back when he was in college. But I think he's put all those things behind him, and now he's in a spot where people just view him as being able to construct a really high-level defense. And at the same time, he's overseen the NBA's number one offense multiple times here in recent years. So, if you're a thirsty Lakers fan or another team where you've got a job opening, I mean, I think Quin Snyder's right at the top of the list, right?
Hey.
A thirsty Lakers fan. There's plenty of those here in Los Angeles. I know that for sure.
Well, trust me, I know. I live there. I'm 2,000 miles away right now, but I still hear from them,
Oh, Ben Golliver, everybody, Washington Post NBA writer. Thanks for taking the time with us and educating us on all the NBA playoffs. Appreciate you, Ben.
Thanks, Ben.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Take care,
the games.
All right, Ben Golliver.
Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.